Alright everyone, it's time for an extra video today. I didn't expect these numbers to come out for a couple more days, but inflation has now officially hit 7% in the United States. Prices continue to skyrocket. This is not just due to increased demand. It's not just due to the Biden shortages, although that does play a role. Part of it is this is the natural fallout from the spending spree of Joe Biden's initial stimulus. At some point, we're also going to get doubled down because of spending from the infrastructure bill, so-called. This is Biden. This is his responsibility. He's toying with the economy and taking it in a very negative, very dark direction. This is the highest, by the way, that inflation has been since 1982. So it's been a while. This will be glossed over briefly by the legacy media. They'll probably try to make excuses for it. Well, the actual price on certain goods only rose a little bit month over month. It's like, marginally, 0.5%, maybe 1%, maybe 2%. The problem is that that's every month. And it's been happening every month for months now. In order for us to undo the economic damage from Bidenomics at this point, we would need a prolonged deflationary economy. Now, you can't deflate things too quickly or that causes economic problems too. It has to be very slow. You have to hold inflation behind the actual growth of the economy, the actual growth of wages. Wages are not keeping up with 7%. I love it when people use additional fuzzy math to defend Beijing Biden, the asterisk administration. They're like, well, wages have risen by a record amount in X number of years. Yes, but it's behind inflation. If the currency is, because that's what inflation effectively does, if the currency is devalued because the purchasing power is less because everything costs more, if wages don't keep up, then you have real fucking problems. And they're not keeping up. And they haven't kept up. Wages have paced behind the inflation consistently since Joe Biden took over as asterisk president of the United States. Again, he's got an asterisk over his head and always will be. So does Kamala. What more need be said? And by the way, the next inflation report is not expected to be any prettier. It's expected to maybe, if we're lucky, it'll plateau. If we're lucky, it'll be in the upper 6, lower 7 range, about the way it is now. I'm honestly wondering why Biden didn't get out ahead of this and try to do the State of the Union in the first week of January before the numbers came out. It's like, yeah, okay, you've got the Omicron surge, you have to deal with that, but which one impacts Americans more in the intermediate term? The Omicron variant, which by all accounts, by all expectations, probably will peak fairly soon and then subside because it'll burn its way through potential hosts, which is good news, by the way. Or inflation, which, those price hikes aren't going to be undone for years to come. Under the best of circumstances, let's say come midterms. This is the best case scenario and the chances of it are virtually non-existent. Midterms come, the Republicans sweep everything, the neocons have been forced aside by populists, and a Republican Speaker of the House ends up president when they remove Biden and Kamala from office kicking and screaming and put them in a cell for their various crimes, not least of which is Biden's pandering to foreign nations a la Hunter's laptop. Let's say that happens. Well, even if you impose massive measures to curb inflation, if you rein in the Fed, audit the Fed, so to speak, hold back the printing of money, slash the budgets, deregulate everything. Even if you do everything right, you would need so many months of inflation pacing so far behind wages that, there's no scenario that I can see under which that happens. The fact is that we've had these cycles before. The damage is always done. And then the government tries to make up the difference by giving a pittance, giving some welfare breadcrumbs to the lower classes. Who gets screwed in the ass consistently? The upper echelons of the working class through the middle of the upper middle class, including the entire core middle class of the United States. They have been abused over and over and over. This is 100 million and so odd Americans. They're not rich, they're not poor, they're in the middle. They don't have the doctorate and the six-figure salary, but they're making more than a minimum wage. The working class, the workers that supposedly the leftoids love so much. None of them even talk about this. Bernie Sanders will stand there and talk about the need to raise the minimum wage. In other words, compact the lower echelon of the working class with the impoverished and make a much larger impoverished class that will still be at the bottom, causing, by the way, more inflation in the process. He never talks about this, about the fact that Bidenomics has caused wages to lag many points behind the growth of inflation. Think about this as a reduction in the value of the currency. Now, let's say you're super wealthy. You've got yachts and fifth homes and apartments and stuff, a landlord class. You don't mind the inflation. It just means that everything that you own is now denominated in more dollars because the dollar's depreciated. The demand's the same for whatever goods and services that you're providing that you have. You're not affected by this. You've got assets that go up and down with the inflation and deflation system. If you're in the middle class, so that the only real tangible asset you have is your home, you're hit by inflation because the majority of the actual wealth that you have, because your primary residence, you live in it, you have to pay to maintain it. It's not an investment, so to speak. You're losing money. If you're in the echelon, the upper middle class, where you've got a nice bank account, you've got fiat currency in it, that fiat currency is being effectively taxed every single month by the government by inflating the currency. So yeah, thanks. Let's go, Brandon. As in go to hell. As in go away from DC. Retire. You're demented. You're fucking the economy up. Kamala should leave too, since she's delinquent in her job. She's the border czar, hasn't visited the border. At some point, is the small section of the population that's still more or less a fan of Biden, and I think that total's probably not even in the tens of millions of people at this point, is that small section that's willing to shill online, red-faced, and constantly getting owned and having to cope and seethe and so forth, ever going to give up the shtick and just admit that they were sold a pig in a poke? They were told for years, Orange Man bad, mean tweets, Russiagate and stuff. And the Democrats, instead of trying to find someone talented, because there weren't many talented people interested in running at all anyway, they just decided to say, well, I guess it's his turn. We'll take the boring old man that couldn't cut it twice before and we'll put him in there. This'll be a good idea. They're using him like a puppet. Technically you can't even on the face blame just Biden. He doesn't make his own decisions. I doubt he knows anything about monetary policy. But his reckless spending, the reluctance of Democrats to rein in the spending, re-regulating things, the shortages caused by lockdownerism, by and large, approved of and promoted by Biden until very recently, that's causing havoc. When you see shortages at the stores, it's not surprising to me. I covered that earlier today. I'm not surprised inflation ticked up again. I'd be surprised if it ticks back down next month. Janet Yellen, head of the Fed itself, probably the most qualified person. If you're looking for an indicator that the economic news will be grim, just look at the fact that Janet Yellen is predicting that it won't peak until next month. And she's got every reason to try to paint a facade of optimism on the economy. Biden's her boss. She doesn't want to countermand him. She'll use the weasel word, say, well, things aren't really that bad. This is as bad as it's been since the end stage of the Carter recession, with the resurgence of the inflation there, mid-first term Ronald Reagan, of course, things out of his hands largely. He managed to rein it in later, and it was morning in America for the second time. But here we don't have a Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's not in office. Jimmy Carter's dumb brother is in office. That's a whole fucking problem. We've got a president who's out to lunch, an absentee vice president. We got an absentee transport secretary too. It's funny because if DeSantis takes a few days off to be with his cancer-stricken wife, he's evil. But if Pete Buttigieg takes months off to be with his adopted children and doesn't literally do any work at all, that's okay. There's a differential in the legacy media as well. I'm almost surprised it didn't go higher than 7%. I guess we should be saying a prayer of thanksgiving that it didn't go to 8%, I suppose. With Bidenomics, you never know. I personally don't even think it necessarily peaks in February. And if it plateaus, it could be at whatever level it ends up there or around this level for quite some time to come. Well, that means prices are still rising month over month. Gas prices are going back up too. Did you see that news? There's a reason why Joe Biden, after freeing up strategic reserves, which is like a couple of weeks worth of oil, by the way, trickling out into the economy, he managed to reduce the price of gas at the pump by 15 cents while it's back up 3 cents now from that lull. It's going back up again. Give it another month, it might be right back up where it was. He failed. He failed on COVID. He failed on gas prices. He failed on Afghanistan. He's failing on inflation. He's failing in every diplomatic aspect. His vice president somehow is an even bigger failure than him. Brandon is a goddamn failure. He doesn't even get an F for his presidency, a big F for fuck Joe Biden. He can't even get that grade. So, yeah, I mean, I imagine the handful of Biden fans that are at least dimly aware of economic issues and those who don't have considerable tangible assets and their wealth is fiat currency in a fucking bank account, a few of them just lost their support for Joey again. I like seeing the push polls that are aggregated on RCP trying desperately to drag his approval up. Doesn't seem to be working. I think it's sticking at the level that it's at for some time to come. That's about all. Peace out.